Sir, you can't pay for a $40 meal with loose change and crumpled bills. This isn't a charity case. The young waitress speaks loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear as 58-year-old Frank Rodriguez counts out quarters and dollar bills on the table. Every customer in the busy diner turns to stare at the man in the faded jacket. They don't notice the small eagle globe and anchor pin barely visible on his collar. What this waitress and every customer is about to discover will change everything. If you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of how they look, smash that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, when was the last time you helped someone instead of judging them? Trust me, you need to see what happens next. Frank had been looking forward to this meal all week. Tony's Diner was where he used to bring his late wife Maria for their anniversary every year. The booth in the corner was their special spot, where they would share stories and plan their future together. Today marked what would have been their 32nd anniversary, and Frank wanted to honor her memory the only way he knew how. The waitress, whose name tag read Jessica, stood over him with her hands on her hips. Her voice carried across the crowded restaurant, drawing attention from every table. The lunch rush was in full swing, and about 30 people were now watching the scene unfold. I'm counting out the exact amount, Frank said quietly, his weathered hands carefully organizing the coins and bills. It's all here. Just give me a moment. Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. Look, old man, this is embarrassing for everyone. We're not a soup kitchen. If you can't afford to eat here, maybe you should try the McDonald's down the street. A businessman at the next table spoke up loudly. Can't management do something about this? I'm trying to have a business lunch here, not watch some homeless guy dig through his pockets. Frank's jaw tightened, but he continued counting. He had exactly $43.75 saved up over the past month from odd jobs and recycling. The meal cost $38.50. He wanted to leave a tip too, just like Maria always insisted they should. The manager, a man in his 40s wearing a tie, walked over with a stern expression. Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This establishment has certain standards. And frankly, your appearance is making our other customers uncomfortable. Frank looked up at him. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a paying customer just like everyone else. The manager shook his head. Look at yourself, sir. Your clothes, your situation. This is a respectable family restaurant. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. More customers were getting involved now. A woman with her teenage daughter whispered loudly, I can't believe they're letting people like that in here. The daughter looked embarrassed but didn't say anything. An elderly couple at a nearby table shook their heads in disapproval. Just call the police, someone shouted from across the restaurant. We shouldn't have to deal with this. Jessica crossed her arms. I'm not touching that dirty money anyway. Who knows where it's been? You probably dug it out of trash cans. Frank felt his chest tighten. He had worked for every penny of that money. He had spent hours walking around the neighborhood, collecting bottles and cans, helping neighbors with small repairs, anything to earn enough for this one special meal. But explaining that would only invite more judgment. A group of college students at a corner booth were taking pictures with their phones. This is going straight to social media, one of them laughed. Homeless guy tries to buy dinner with pocket change. The businessman stood up from his table. Manager, I demand you handle this situation immediately. I bring clients here regularly, and this is completely unacceptable. How are we supposed to enjoy our meals with this person? Creating a disturbance? Frank wasn't creating any disturbance. He was sitting quietly, trying to pay for his food like any other customer. But the crowd was growing louder and more hostile by the minute. You know what people like you do, right? Jessica continued, her voice getting louder. You come into nice places like this, thinking you can guilt trip us into feeling sorry for you. Well, it's not going to work here. A middle-aged woman joined the conversation. I bet he doesn't even have A real home. Probably sleeps under bridges and bothers decent people all day long. Frank's hands were shaking slightly now, not from fear, but from anger. He had faced hostile situations before, much worse than this. But there was something particularly painful about being judged by people who knew nothing about his life or his sacrifices. The manager pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. This has gone on long enough. Sir, you need to leave immediately, or you'll be arrested for trespassing." Frank looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at him. Some showed disgust. Others looked annoyed that their meals were being interrupted. A few people seemed uncomfortable with how the situation was being handled, but nobody spoke up for him. "Fine," he said quietly, starting to gather his money. "I'll leave." But as he began to stand up, the door to the restaurant swung open with a loud bang. A group of men in military dress uniforms walked in, their faces serious and purposeful. The leader, a Marine colonel with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons, scanned the room until his eyes found Frank. The entire restaurant fell silent. The colonel walked directly through the crowd of customers, his boots clicking on the floor. Every step commanded attention and respect. "Gunny Rodriguez," the colonel said with clear authority in his voice, standing at attention. "We've been looking everywhere for you." Frank slowly straightened up. The change in his posture was immediate and unmistakable. His shoulders pulled back, his chin lifted, and suddenly he looked like a completely different person. "Colonel Martinez." Frank replied with a nod. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." The colonel turned to face the crowd of customers, his expression stern. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Gunnery Sergeant Frank Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps, retired. 26 years of service to this country." Jessica's face went completely white. The manager's phone slipped from his hand. The businessman who had been complaining suddenly found his food very interesting. But the colonel wasn't finished. "Gunny Rodriguez served 4 tours in Vietnam, 2 in Desert Storm, and 3 in Afghanistan. He's been awarded the Purple Heart twice, the Bronze Star with V device for valor, and the Navy Commendation Medal with Combat V. One of the other Marines stepped forward carrying a large certificate. "Sir," he said to Frank, "we wanted to present this to you personally. Your nomination for the Veterans Hall of Fame has been approved." The restaurant was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Frank accepted the certificate with steady hands, and for the first time since he'd entered the diner, he smiled. Colonel Martinez addressed the crowd again. "Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez isn't just any veteran. During the Battle of Khe Sanh, he single-handedly held a position for 6 hours while his unit evacuated wounded Marines. He saved 43 lives that day." The college student who had been taking pictures slowly put his phone away, his face red with shame. The businessman stared at his plate, unable to meet anyone's eyes. A young Marine approached Frank with a folded flag. "Gunny, this flag flew over Marine Corps Base Quantico yesterday in your honor. We wanted you to have it." Frank's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the flag. He thought about Maria, about how proud she would have been to see this moment. She always knew what he had done in the service, even when he didn't like to talk about it. Jessica finally found her voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Frank looked at her kindly. "Most people don't know. And that's okay. But maybe next time, you might try treating people with respect before you know their story." The manager stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Rodriguez, your meal is on the house today. And every day from now on. I sincerely apologize for how you were treated." The businessman who had complained earlier stood up and walked over to Frank. "Sir," he said, extending his hand, "I owe you an enormous apology. And I owe you my freedom. Thank you for your service." Frank shook his hand. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them." Colonel Martinez placed a hand on Frank's shoulder. "Gunny, we have a car waiting outside. The Marine Corps' birthday ball is tonight. And you're our guest of honor. Frank looked surprised. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to something like that. The colonel smiled. Already taken care of. Full dress blues are waiting for you at the base, pressed and ready. Tonight, every Marine in the state will hear your story. As Frank prepared to leave with the Marines, something beautiful happened. The elderly couple that had been shaking their heads earlier stood up and started clapping. Soon, the entire restaurant was on their feet, applauding. The woman who had whispered about him being homeless walked over with tears in her eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, she said, my son is deployed overseas right now. Thank you for keeping him safe. Frank nodded to her gently. Every generation of Marines looks out for the next. Your son is in good hands. The teenage daughter who had seemed embarrassed earlier broke away from her mother and approached Frank. Sir, she said, I want to join the Marines. When I graduate, do you think I could do it? Frank looked at her seriously. Young lady, if you have the heart and the determination, you can do anything. The Marines would be lucky to have you. Colonel Martinez gestured toward the door. Gunny, are you ready? Frank picked up his carefully, counted money from the table, and put it back in his pocket. He looked around the restaurant one more time, at all the faces that had been judging him just minutes before. Then he walked out with the Marines, his back straight and his head held. Hi, the manager turned to Jessica after they left. From now on, he said quietly, every customer gets treated with respect, no matter what they look like or how they pay. We almost lost the chance to serve a real American hero today. Jessica nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. She would never forget this day, and she would never judge someone by their appearance again. Outside, Frank climbed into the Marine Corps' vehicle. As they drove away, he looked back at Tony's diner one last time. He thought about Maria, about how she always told him that respect had to be earned. But dignity was something every person deserved from the start. Tonight, he would put on his dress blues and be honored by his fellow Marines. But first, he made a mental note to come back to the diner next week. Not for the free meal, but to check on Jessica and make sure she was doing okay. That's what Marines did. They looked out for each other and for everyone else too.